Welcome to the PEEP podcast. I'm your host, Nicolle, and on this episode, we're talking about near-death experiences with Robert and Suzanne Mays. Before we get into the topic, I'd like to remind you that if you're listening before October 7th, 2021, there's still time to buy tickets for my live virtual talk for the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship. The link for more information is in the show notes. Now back to the subject of this episode. I've had a fascination with near-death experiences, called NDEs for short, since I can remember. But as you'll hear during this interview, my curiosity about the subject strengthened in February of 2016. I'll warn you that rather than editing out a personal part of the conversation, I decided to be vulnerable and leave it in with the hope that hearing the whole discussion may help someone else. So please forgive me if that makes you a little uncomfortable. Fast forward if you need to. Suzanne and Robert Mays have studied the phenomena related to near-death experiences together for over 40 years, although neither has had a near-death experience. They began active research on NDEs in 2005. Robert received a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from MIT and worked in software development at Eastman Kodak and later at IBM for more than 30 years, where he achieved the level of senior software engineer. At IBM, he specialized in software development process, software quality, and software defect prevention. He was a co-recipient of IBM's first Corporate Quality Award in 1991. After leaving IBM, he taught high school chemistry for several years at different Waldorf schools in the U.S., and he is now retired. Suzanne received an Associate in Arts degree in Medical Secretarial Science from Alfred State College, SUNY, Alfred, New York, and is a certified music practitioner with training through the Music for Healing and Transition program. As a certified music practitioner, she provided palliative care to patients in UNC hospitals and Duke University Medical Center. She also teaches lyre privately at the Emerson Waldorf School. Robert and Suzanne have also extensively studied anthroposophy and the works of Rudolf Steiner, and were involved in founding the Emerson Waldorf School in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Let's dive in with Robert and Suzanne. Hi, Robert and Suzanne. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are y'all doing?
We're doing good.
Really good. Thank you.
Good. My first question to my guest is always, what sparked your interest? So today we're talking about near-death experiences, and I've always had a fascination in them, just because I think that they could be proof of the continuance of the mind or the spirit after the body dies. But a lot of people don't know much about near-death experiences, and I'm just wondering, what sparked your interest individually, if you could answer that way?
Well, our stories are very similar. Basically, we were studying esoteric things when we were in our late 20s.
So long ago. We were so young back then.
Yeah,
that's almost 50 years ago.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and we, of course, we were keeping up with what was being written, and Raymond Moody's book came out, and that was the first time we had heard about near-death experiences. But it was like, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. This makes perfect sense that the person is having an experience that really is of a transcendent nature, and they they have all of these experiences, yet they come back to their physical body and they are transformed. And we were reading some books by Rudolf Steiner in anthroposophy, and he was, in the lecture that we happened to be reading at the same time, was saying exactly the same thing. So, and then we also saw the book by George Ritchie, Return from Tomorrow. So Life After Life by Raymond Moody, and then Return from Tomorrow by George Ritchie. And we said, oh, well, this proves it. So there isn't anything more we need to say. It's obvious. And then, well, do you want to say anything more about that?
Right off the bat, we should say that neither Robert nor myself have had one of these extraordinary experiences.
Okay.
For myself, the question of, well, where have we come from when we were born? And what is death all about? Why do we have this body? What is the purpose for going through this experience of having a body, which is so filled with questions and uncertainties and pain, sickness, and we die. So what happens? So it's been a lifelong question. Not only what happens, but what is the nature of the spiritual world? If we're spiritual soul and spiritual beings, who really are we? So nobody has the whole answer, but there are indications and clues that gives one more of a confidence in life of where we're going, the direction we're going, and so this question of, well, what happens when we die? What was I before I was born has been my lodestone for guiding me this life.
Those are very good questions, and I'm sure most people can relate to some degree to those questions.
Everybody's been born. Every human being's been born.
Right.
Every human being is going to shed this body. So I think inherently we all have that question. Some it's more conscious and more active. People take up a spiritual practice, a discipline, a particular teaching to help you penetrate, plumb those steps of those questions. Other people, it's not so conscious, but it's there. It's in every one of us. Some people just absolutely deny that there's anything other than just this body, just this physical existence, but still it's there. There's something in there that's kind of nudging us.
Right. So, go ahead.
And then in 2004, my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And back then that was a pretty ominous diagnosis. And so I wanted to find a book that I could give him that would explain, well, you know, you don't really die, and so on. And I couldn't find one. I thought, you know, it's been whatever, nearly 30 years then, and so there's got to be a book. Surely there's, you know. So I started to look at what the literature had, and we started our research actively in 2005, and found that there was no book at the time. And now there are some books. There's some good books, and but so we started doing our research, thinking that we could write a book that would be helpful for people who are facing death because of illness or injury or whatever, and that would be worthwhile, and it would help my father. Well, there were no books, and it was in our research immediately dove into near-death experiences, and it just got deeper and deeper into that, because there was has always been this controversy about, well, this doesn't, these are hallucinations and it's caused by various physiological or psychological things, and so therefore it is just still the process of the dying brain. And so we started doing that research, and then of course my father was getting worse, and so I gave him Raymond Moody's book and George Ritchie's book, and also Howard Storm's book, and on his NDE, and these helped him, and then I finally had a chance to talk to him and said, well, Dad, what do you think about these near-death experiences? And he says, well, is that like flying dreams? And I'm saying, oh, you've had flying dreams? Okay, well, then you had an experience of being out of your body. So I guess, yeah, so basically he already knew. And it wasn't anything that he needed to be prompted on. But we did have a couple of good conversations, and it was comforting to know that he basically already knew it. And anyway, that's what got us started on the NDE research.
You wanted to provide him something other than just going on faith. I mean, he was
Right.
a man of faith,
Right.
And he was an intellectual. I mean, he had his doctorate and he worked for the State Department. He's been in different countries, so he has more of a world outlook. But this is a guy that his father supported him through MIT, and Robert's a scientist. He has his degree in chemistry. So I think your motive was that you wanted to provide him something that also appealed to common sense, mm-hmm. and to actual observation,
experience,
actual experience that could be looked at scientifically too. So he's the one who really got us started to actively begin our work, and we think he's sort of been behind us as our kind of like our guardian angel, because things have just fallen in our place since right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So when you first started your research, you'd already read the books that were out there. What direction did you take with it initially?
To understand the phenomenon, we have a background in phenomenology, and the idea is, and actually that was, I think, originally or certainly notably mentioned and developed by Goethe, Wolfgang von Goethe, and in the 1700s and the 1800s, early 1800s. And he said that the phenomenon is the theory. In other words, you don't need to have anything else. The phenomenon speaks, and then you just need to read the phenomenon. And so he had the idea of the archetypal phenomenon. In other words, a phenomenon in the area that you're looking that contains the whole in one simple expression. And for near-death experiences, for consciousness, for the human being, the experience that contains it all is the near-death experience. And in particular, what we quickly realized was the separation of the mind from the body. So it's like that is the archetypal phenomenon of that explains consciousness and death, and actually can go on to explain other aspects, for example, reincarnation. But basically that the NDE is the archetypal phenomena that we took up. And then we said, okay, well, how do we explain all of this? And we were told by two NDE researchers two specific things that we needed to look at after we had written our first paper. And one is, how does the mind, the non-material mind, interact with the brain? Mm-hmm. And the other one was
the brain, a physical object interacting with something that's not physical.
And then how does it work? Okay, here's the mind working with the brain. How does that really work? And actually, the interaction part is actually the easier part. But and it took us a lot longer to figure out how it works, and to figure out it's really a hypothesis of how it goes about working, a mechanism. But there is, those were the two challenges that we had from Peter Fenwick and Bruce Grayson, and yeah, that's what's guided our research.
So all these years later, do you feel like you have pretty solid answers to those questions?
Yes. Well, certainly they both need empirical validation. So, but the issue of interaction is there from the near-death experience. There are numerous cases of interaction. In fact, the NDE or out-of-body mind could not perceive anything outside of the body if there was an interaction with light and with sound waves, and also they can perceive telepathically the thoughts of people that they are around. And there's a whole panoply of aspects of perception that are unusual in near-death experiences, which also indicate further aspects of the transcendent realm. But
don't forget, there are unusual aspects of perception, but they are corroborated,
yes,
and verified.
Yeah.
And that's what gives the evidential nature. That's what gives the weight and the confidence in any kind of hypothesis about the mind separating from the body, the mind being able to integrate and function with a material body.
So there's interaction, and that's exactly right. The veridical perceptions when the person is out of the body really demonstrate that they're real perceptions, and the person is really out of the body because they're happening when the person has cardiac arrest and there's no brain activity at all, and they happen out of the reach of their physical senses in the body anyway.
And none of the natural sciences, those that are specific, focusing in on the physiological aspects of the body, can answer these anomalous happenings,
right?
Things that just are out of the realm of possibility. I mean, how can somebody be 100,000 miles away, see things, observe things, bring it back as information? It's totally corroborated by other people, right on the spot, not later, not the story's not been elaborated or made up later, but on the spot. How is that possible?
Right.
There isn't any theory right now that is, if you would want to call it materialistic, there isn't any that can account for it.
Right.
At least this theory, this hypothesis of that there is a non-material aspect of the human being that is the essence of who we are, can separate and can function from the body and be so much more than what we are in the body, that there are capacities so much more greater than in the body.
Yeah.
This is a possibility that needs to be looked at and have conversations with, not argue about who's right or wrong, but what extends what we already know in the material physical sciences and what is being indicated, implied here, shown here, that lies behind physical manifestation. That's what the phenomenology is about. What lies behind everything that we see of the objects in the outer world? What's living behind that?
And then, of course, the question of interaction, how does it work? In other words, if there is interaction, and there is in particular interaction with physical matter, which is, some people would say, well, you can't see the NDE, and the NDE seems to pass through walls. But there is subtle interaction with physical matter, and that interaction includes a kind of drag when a person passes through a solid object. They feel a resistance or a drag, or and when a person, an NDEer who's out of the body and wants to stop the doctor, you don't need to stop the CPR, and they put their hand inside, well, on the arm, but it actually goes inside the arm because it's non-material, and they feel something there. They feel that it's a kind of gelatinous consistency, and that it has electrical current running through it.
Yeah.
And both of those are an indication of neurological interaction. So there is this evidence of, and there are not a huge number of accounts, but there are similar accounts and from several NDEs that we've uncovered.
In the literature.
And so there has to be a way that the mind can interact with the brain, because there's this very high correlation between brain activity and conscious experience. So so we worked out how that might work, and that's basically our theory, that the mind is separate from the physical body and separates in the NDE, but in the ordinary consciousness, the mind works directly with the brain to develop conscious awareness. There has to be brain activity that brings things to conscious awareness. So that's basically our theory.
Yeah. And it's the idea of the mind and the brain being two separate things is not a new idea.
Right.
But it's also been the subject of controversy between philosophers and scientists because it's such a hard thing to try to prove.
Right.
But to me, it is obvious, but I have no empirical evidence to show for, why I think it's obvious. But there are two types of, there are multiple types of ways to prove a theory. There are, the scientific studies that you can do in a lab and you can do over and over to try to prove that you get those same results over and over every time you do them. And then there's more the observational, where you do the surveys and you look at all the literature and you do that. So that is the type of exploration that you have to do in this case.
Right. But actually, basically, when you have figured out something, and particularly if it's related to neurological phenomena, then you have to be able to explain things, and this is so much. Did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. So, as you say, we've been talking about NDE, near-death experience.
Yes.
So when you expand that out to the whole spectrum of death-related phenomena,
oh yeah,
what's the picture, that the overall coherent, unified picture that demonstrates very convincingly what we're saying here, that we have a aspect of our being that is non-physical. We could say spiritual, but we won't say that, but non-physical, and is not tied to the body and can have just expanded consciousness, and is not subject to anything that the body is subject to, pain, any physical disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
There's peace.
Mm-hmm.
There's a feeling of being at home, well-being, all knowing. There's all that, but then there's the other elements of the shared death experience, and then there's the elements of after death communication,
deceased relatives,
and all having to do with people, human beings that have died or come close to death. And what are the stories that each each situation says, that continues to build up to the case. Yes, we do not die when we die with the body.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question because you said shared death experiences. Until I watched the video that you sent me the link to, and I'll share the link in the show notes so other people can watch it. Until I watched that, I had never heard of shared death experiences. So do you mind explaining what that is?
Okay, well, first of all, this is a phenomenon that has actually been around for quite a while. I would say, since the beginning of time, but it was not, and it was noted, certain aspects of it were noted in the 1800s and the early 1900s, what are called deathbed visions, or being in the presence of a person who is dying. And there are various phenomena that occur to the observers, the people who are around, usually loved ones or friends who are present when a person dies. And they see various things, but this was not, and a lot of these were reported in the parapsychological literature, but they were never really defined or studied phenomenologically until Raymond Moody came out with a book, Glimpses of Eternity, in 2010.
But he knew about it.
Yes.
From the very beginning of his working with, when people were coming to him in the 60s, in the early 70s.
Yeah.
He knew, because he writes of this one extraordinary experience of the professor, or
Dr.
Jameson, who had a shared death experience. But it took Moody how many decades to finally be able to put something in print about it. So it's an example of how this whole field of of near death, of the dying,
Mm-hmm.
is expanding and coming more and more into the light, and is being more and more understood, and leading thoughts are being presented. And so, yeah, it's taken all this time.
So what a shared death experience, the things that sometimes happen, there can be a light in the room that people observe that isn't coming from any source of physical light, and is observed by several people at the same time. There can be a music that's coming from, people don't know where, but it's beautiful music. People can, as the person is dying, they can see something rising up from the body, and of course this goes back, has been documented for many, centuries.
And the configuration of the room changes.
Yes.
Or like the walls kind of like disappear.
Which are indications, by the way, of the change of the person's consciousness, the SDEers consciousness.
And we have to remember the person who's sharing in this experience is perfectly healthy.
Yeah.
Right.
They're in their right mind, totally unexpected. It's spontaneous. Okay, so it's not like been expected.
Yeah.
So in some cases, when the person dies, their essence lifts up out of the body. These onlookers also go out of body, and you can tell, that the idea that they're hearing things and seeing things that are unusual is an indication that they're getting ready to have an out-of-body experience. And so they find themselves above their own body with the deceased person out of body, and then they see what we know usually happens in NDEs. Deceased loved one, there's a tunnel that opens up. Deceased loved ones come through the tunnel to greet the now deceased person, and they are friends and relatives of the deceased person. And the onlooker, the shared death experiencer, is observing this. And the deceased person is, or shall we say, newly passed person, They have the people who study this have a term. They don't want to call them deceased persons.
Decedent.
Anyway, so they see the person having a life review, and if they are related to the person, like they're the spouse of the person, they will also see their own events in their life that they shared with the person, their husband. So there is veridical information there, and also objective information, because the SDE are seeing all of this.
Right.
And then the person, the person who's the newly died person is escorted by their friends and loved ones to a higher realm, and the shared death experiencer comes back in body, and they find themselves in the presence of the body of their now deceased person, loved one. So that's the essence of the shared death experience, and there are a number of cases where you can, there's veridical information that is brought back by the SDEer, and also where there are two people in the room having very similar experiences, sometimes identical experiences out of body. So that's the shared death experience.
At the same time. Yeah.
And that's, for us, that's very, very evidential, because it shows that there's an objective reality of the process of dying. So the NDE is the process of dying. Some skeptics said, well, we don't really know if that's what happens when you actually die, because the NDE comes back. But the NDE, the things that happen to the NDE are also happen to the person who is dying, and they are observed by the shared death experiencer.
That is amazing. I've heard people who work with who do hospice care.
Yes.
Who work with the dying. I've listened to some stories from nurses and doctors who have been present at the time of death and seen the person who is dying interact with people that they could not see, and name names and have conversations before they pass over. So I've heard of that experience. I just never heard of a full shared death experience. So very amazing stories. And I could imagine that the person who continued living probably had a sense of peace about the situation.
Yes. They have the same kind of after effects as NDEers, because basically they've had a kind of, well, we would say that what they experience in the shared death experience, particularly if they're out of their body, then that's a near-death like experience. And so you would expect that they would have the same kinds of loss of fear of death, and a sense of peace, and a sense of certainty that we do not die. So even though they have not had an official near-death experience, if you took their experience and asked them to do the near-death experience scale, it would be counted as an NDE.
That makes sense.
Near-death-like experience.
Most likely it would, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've been talking about near-death experiences, and maybe for listeners who have not looked into these much, could we take a step back? Might be a little late in doing this, but could take a step back and just talk about what the typical quote unquote near-death experience is.
Sure. Well, there's a whole long list of elements. There are 16 questions in the near-death experience scale, which go through a number of the elements. Doesn't include all of them. But there's, first of all, there's a feeling of peace. There's a feeling of separation from the physical body, having an out-of-body experience. There's a sense of, having a transition to a higher realm, seeing deceased relatives, seeing spiritual beings, being of light, a being who is really blindingly bright white light, but still it doesn't hurt their eyes. They're out of the body anyway, but it actually is a being of love, unconditional love. They may have a life review, which actually frequently happens when you're in an accident or you are close to death. There's a life review, but this is in the experience. It's more extensive. There is a being there with you who does not judge you, but you judge yourself. In the life review, you go through the events of your life. Sometimes it's all of the events, and they're laid out in a panorama all around you, and you can zip through them all.
It's like a film, right? A moving film all around.
And then you can and focus in, or actually every one of them. And in each one of them, it's an interaction that you had with another person or a number of people, and how you acted and how they felt. So you understand and you remember, you see again what you were feeling, and then you also see and what you did, but then you also see how they took it, what that felt like to them.
Not only felt, the ripple effect of how their actions, where their life force went, and everybody associated with them down the generations. So
Wow.
So there's you see the effect on them, and then they have the what happened to them, like you happen to kill them or something, then there's a ripple effect. But even if you just insulted them, they what they felt bad, that is carried into their life and into their circle of family and friends, and there is this ripple effect, and you see that, and as Suzanne says, it can carry through generations, where if a soldier kills a combatant on the other side, then the death of the person that they killed has this ripple effect throughout the generations of their family. And so that's life review.
Another aspect is that you see not only what you didn't do that lacked love and understanding, but what you could have done.
Right.
It's not what you should have done. There's not this condemnation or judgment, but there were opportunities to have done something differently that would have been more in alignment of who we really are, as divine spiritual beings.
So you see what you did and the effects, but what could you have done?
So it's this experience of free choice. You see what you chose.
Yeah.
And for those that are fortunate enough to be able to come back, they invariably will say, now I'm going to be a different person.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's finish the NDE.
Yeah.
So there's the life review.
And then there's the life
preview. So there are also frequently the NDE, not frequently, but the life review is relatively rare, but then a life preview is even less frequent, and that involves the seeing scenes of your life, what's going to happen to you after you go back. Okay. And they are veridical. In other words, they happen afterwards, and you say, oh yeah, well that's I saw that in my NDE. I'm seeing what's happening now. I saw that in my NDE. And they can be also visions of what will happen in the future for the world. So, or terrible accidents, or 9/11, or and these things come back to them. These prophetic visions come back to them when they usually when they are kind of forewarned, this is going to happen sometime before it happens, sometimes only a day before it happens, sometimes several years before it happens. And so prophetic visions, and then they either choose to come back, which is actually relatively rare, because what they feel in the transcendent realm that they're in is unconditional love, and they don't want to come back.
That's a true home, they say.
Yes, it is. It's frequent, but they're told to come back. You have more to do on earth. It's not your time. It's not your time. You have more to do on earth. Those are very common among many, many thousands of NDEs. They're told it's not your time. You have to go back because you have more to do on earth. And that really tells you something about our destiny, why we are here, actually. And of course, sometimes they don't know why. What they have is, I'm back now. What am I supposed to do?
A lot of times they're told you're going to forget. You're not going to remember this when you come back. But when the time is right, when it's the appropriate time, some things will come back to you.
Right. And because it's still, you have to learn the lessons. You have to learn to choose correctly meaning out of love. And
freely chosen love,
right? Acting out of love. So and then they're back in their body, and then all their pain comes back if they were in pain, and disabilities and so on. And actually they're told, well, you've got to squeeze back in. I don't want to. Well, first of all, that body isn't me. And I there's no way that I can fit into that body, because that body is so small, and they really do have to squeeze in, some of them, and
like a shrunken wool sweater,
trying to put it on. So anyway, that's near-death experience.
So you mentioned the idea that some people will get premonitions of things that are going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
So am I right in that you are doing additional research around this subject?
Yes.
Would you like to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. So we became aware, of course, of these prophetic visions that some people had, and some of them, were clearly didn't happen, and that's okay, because everything is in flux, and people have free will, and certain things, fortunately, do not happen. But we also became aware of NDEers who had visions, for example, of airplane crashes. And there's one in particular, Tom Sawyer, who in 1980, I can't remember exactly when, let's say 83, started, well, he overheard somebody say that there will never be a crash of another L-1011 airplane, which was a particular kind of jet airliner at the time, and it was Tom Sawyer's favorite jet, and he knew, because after his NDE, he was in this place of all knowledge, and so all of a sudden he heard something that was wrong, that was a lie, that's not true. Actually, it wasn't a lie. They were quoting a movie about a crash of an L-1011, where the ghost who was coming back because he didn't want another L-1011 to crash, and of course that was also veridical. That had been seen by several people on the real L-1011s. But here was a statement that was inferred from the movie that there will not be another crash of an L-1011, And Tom knew that that was wrong. He just knew it.
Yeah.
And in fact, he got really upset because he knew a lot of things about the crash.
He knew everybody on that plane. He knew their name
and
who they were going to die.
And that they were going to die. And he knew that there was going to be one person who was going to be killed on the ground.
Who was not in the plane.
Who was not in the plane. And he knew that it was going to crash next to two white buildings. And it was going to be, he knew it was going to be the United States. So, so he told this to a lot of people,
including Bruce Grayson.
And Bruce Grayson was one who he confided in, and he says, so poor Tom was looking for, where is this airport? I have a picture of where it's going to crash, but he goes to, and he flies around. Sometimes he deliberately flies to different cities so that he can see, well, is this where it will be? Is this where it will be? And then as it comes closer to when it's going to, he didn't know when it was going to happen or where it was going to happen. But he started to call Bruce and say, I have a feeling this is coming. And then he says that he goes out to the front porch and picks up a newspaper that had just been delivered. And instead of seeing the front page as it was printed, he says he saw the headline that there was this crash, the one that he was anticipating. Mm-hmm. So he calls Bruce Grayson up and says, well, it doesn't say anything. He just calls, and Bruce knew he was calling, and Bruce
upset.
says,
he was very, very upset.
Today is the day, Bruce asked, and Tom says, yeah, it's today. And so what happened was later on that afternoon, there was an L-1011 that crashed at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport in the microburst of, as it was trying to land, it tried to land in a thunderstorm, and there was a microburst that pushed the plane down onto the ground. And so the plane hit the ground, hit a truck that was, or I think it was a truck or car, and killed the passenger in that, and then skid over a muddy field right next to two water towers, white water towers.
Wow.
And, there were 130 passengers of the, 30, I think, I can't remember the numbers, but over 100 people died. And then, of course, he was devastated because he couldn't have prevented it. So anyway, that was a premonition. There are other people that have had premonitions and plane crashes and other catastrophes, and one of them is just recently wrote a book. Her name is Elizabeth Krohn, and she Krohn, and she describes quite a number of these, where she would get this feeling that there's going to be something happening, and then she will usually she can't take that. She takes a nap or she goes to bed, and then in her dream, she sees exactly what was going to happen. The next day is when it happens. And so she was with her husband in Israel at this time, and this particular time, and she had this feeling in the afternoon. She had to take a nap because this thing was coming on, and she didn't want to see it anyway. So she saw, and she told her husband, I saw this plane landing on the water, and then there were the people lining up on the wings. And her husband said, that's impossible. Planes don't land on the water, and people don't climb out on the wings. And that was the Miracle on the Hudson.
Yeah.
Sully Sullenberger.
Amazing.
And of course, everybody knows that. because it's an iconic picture. Well, she saw that iconic picture. Wait a minute. It's an iconic picture. She saw the picture of the plane landing on the water and the people, the passengers climbing out. And and then the next, so that was in the afternoon, the evening, and the next morning, there it was in the news.
Wow.
And anyway, so there are these veridical perceptions, and then not veridical perceptions, veridical prophetic visions, and then we were aware of a fellow named Kenneth Leth, Leth, but pronounced Let, who had a vision, and he wrote a little book about it, and it was published, and we became aware of it, and it dealt with a number of things that were going to happen, which did ultimately happen, which he saw coming. But then in 2015, he started seeing, now he had his NDE in 1963 when he was 8 years old. And so this, and most of the prophetic visions were hidden from him, were erased from his memory, and he was told that they would come back. He was with an angel who had a globe of the world and showed him things that were going to happen in the United States. And so when there was the presidential nomination, well, actually presidential nomination process that was going on in 2016, he started getting this vision. This vision came back to him, and it was of a man who was going to be running for president. He was blonde, and he was running against a woman, and the woman had a connection with a former president, and he heard the voice of the woman, and this was in early 2016 that he was being interviewed by Lee Whitting, who does NDE radio, podcast or broadcast, basically it's a broadcast, and he told him this, and at the end of 2015 he had some of these visions. It wasn't covered in the interview, and then he had another interview in 2016, early 2016, and he gave the beginnings of this interview, of this vision, and we said, oh well, this is another one of these vertical prophetic visions, it seems, and there was the sequence of events that he laid out in. He published a version of his book, and his book has been reissued, but essentially the story that he's told in the first versions and all match up. And basically he predicted that there would be certain events that happened in 2020 and that followed that, and what he predicted was that what he saw was that the blonde president would be forced out of office, and he would incite people to there would be violence right after that, and that there would be this fighting in a city south of New York. He didn't know what the city was. Actually, he didn't have a very good idea of geography of where exactly it could be. But after it happened, after the insurrection happened in the Capitol, against the Capitol and the Congress, he said, well, that was what he saw. So basically, he predicted that the events of 20. Well, we did a video. We gave the details of this in our talk in 2019. So anyway, he his prophetic vision by and large came about, but actually that's just the beginning, because he said then the blonde president dies, and after that the violence will get worse, and there will be a full-blown civil war. And he was talking to the angel who was showing him this, and he says, well, that's a civil war, but is that the civil war we learned about in school? No, it's going to be much worse than that civil war, the first civil war. And there would be the second civil war, and it would be much worse. And if you look at what happened in the first civil war, much worse is pretty darn bad.
Yeah, that's
Our
frightening.
interest in exploring what's really coming through people who have these out-of-body experiences and NDEs is not for the sensationalism at all. I mean,
Right.
people that have premonitions and precognition, they're like messengers.
Mm-hmm.
They have a message, and it's sort of like it's a wake-up call to wake up. You people, humanity still has a choice. We still
Yeah,
this doesn't necessarily mean it has to happen.
has to happen, right?
But what's being called for is a change of heart and a change of way we think.
Mm-hmm.
and because the NDE is so tied to this moral element, they all come back saying, we have a way that we need to be working with each other and regarding the earth, which has to do with love. It's morality. It's a moral way of behaving, an ethical way of behaving. And so these messages that come through can the hope is that if people hear about them, it might give pause and say, wait a minute, okay, we're in the midst of huge confusion. Nobody knows, polarity, division, and we don't know which way to go. We don't know who to believe. We don't know really. Mm-hmm. But the NDE gives the answer that our response always needs to be tied to kindness, compassion, a calmness, and a real conviction, all is for the good.
And
so it's not to instill fear. These visions are not to get us more caught up in the terror and the fear, but it's to say, breathe, right. Look at this. Right. You have a choice to participate in a different way. This is all here for our goodness. It's for us to wake up to the higher reality of our being and what we're here for.
Right.
And it's serving us, this abyss that we're in here right now in the world and in our country in particular. There's a saying, blessed by illness. Well, we're blessed by what is not of light.
Chaos. There is a purpose to everything in each of our lives, and even the bad things. And the lesson is in how we choose to respond.
Because everything that we think or feel or do has consequences. Mm-hmm. We are we're our own guide. I mean, we're to be our own master of how we want to be and how we want the world to be.
So it's
in our hands.
We can respond with anger or fear or lashing out at people,
selfishness,
greed, and so on. Yeah. Or we can respond with love and kindness, acceptance,
empathy.
Yes.
Empathy. Yeah. So that's and actually we are all being tested. It seems like this is the time. These are times of strong testing of everyone.
Nobody's immune.
Right.
Literally, Nobody's immune.
Even if you're
We should
vaccinated.
thank COVID for that.
So yeah, and a couple of NDEs did mention that did cite that they had foreseen the pandemic. Of course, they told us after it had come about, so it's not as evidential as, for example, Ken Lett's prophetic vision, but still, it is what we need to learn from all of these things, and we are brought to this world to face difficulties. It isn't that life on earth is going to be just wonderful. No, we're here to learn, and you don't learn except if you are given these challenges, and that's why the challenges are there.
Right.
Yeah.
I have had that philosophy since I was a kid, that, I don't know where I picked it up. I'm sure maybe it was something I watched on TV. I don't know, or maybe it was intuitive. But that, we're here to learn, and everything we experience is a lesson. So
yes,
the best way to live your life is to understand that even the bad things that happen are lessons, and what can you take from it and move forward and use it for the good.
Exactly. Exactly. At a personal level, and in groups, and at the level of society.
That's what we hope this podcast will do.
That is, so I actually had an experience that wasn't a full near-death experience, and I haven't talked about it on my podcast, but I'll just briefly explain. So I don't know why I got emotional, because I've talked about it before. It's just talking about it in a public way, I guess I'm not ready for. But I'll let y'all know. I was in a head-on collision in 2016. I was driving down 401 North, where it's 2 lanes coming from Lewisburg to Raleigh. And a guy crossed the center line and hit me head on. And I remember seeing the headlight, because I tried to turn the car. I remember in my head, I was screaming, oh my God, he's going to hit me. And I tried to turn the car. So his headlight hit, like he was in a Tahoe and I was in an HHR, which is a shorter vehicle. And then I was floating. And I was going up over the trees. Everything was kind of grayish brown. And the thought I had immediately was, well, that was it. And then that was it. I mean, literally, that's what I said. That was it. And then I was okay. I was like totally at peace with what just happened. But then I felt 2 hands push me back down into my body. Like, so I didn't have the going into the light and the full review. I just got pushed back into my body, and I was suddenly aware that my eyes were open, and there was this horrible sound in my ears. And I realized I was screaming because the car was doing 360s down the road. And there were these 2 gigantic oak trees. And I just kept saying, please don't let me hit them. Please don't let me hit them. And I ended up facing the opposite direction in the ditch across the street from the trees. And I did not feel any pain until they cut me out of the car. And I realized I couldn't walk on my legs. So I came out of it with just a broken leg. And I didn't even process what had happened for days, because it was just like, okay, now I hurt and I'm scared and I'm a little freaked out about what just happened. So I was in shock. And but yeah, it was just, I'd always been interested in NDEs before, but it just spurred the interest even more. And then I hear the stories of, I was talking to these light beings, and I'm like, I feel gypped. I didn't get the full experience.
Well,
but you go through that and then you're like, why am I still here? Because even if I didn't, nobody said, okay, she's time of death was, or anything like that. But I know in that instant I was gone and I just was totally fine with it. I don't have a fear of death anymore. I'm not in a hurry to die because I do feel like there's some reason I'm still here.
Yep.
So, and I think part of the reason I'm still here is actually this podcast. And to try to get these messages out, and almost every conversation I have, no matter what the conversation is about, comes back to acting out of love and changing the world around you by acting out of love and being that example to people. So
yeah, and that certainly qualifies as a near-death experience. I mean, you don't have to. Actually, one of the things we say in our study is that there are people who don't have. They're not near death at all. They, just like the shared death experiencer is not near death at all, and they have this experience, which would count as an NDE like experience, and yours would be too. And you felt something. You had an interaction with a being, and a spiritual being, clearly. Yeah. And so your experience would count as a near-death experience, and you were near death. I mean, people have gone through less than that, and had a near-death experience. So you broke your leg and you were spinning around, and so that's that kind of shock. It's kind of ironic. It's not ironic, it's symbolic that you turned 180 degrees around.
Right.
What was your life like before the accident, and has it changed for you outwardly and inwardly since?
I have always been a very spiritual person, and I've always been intuitive and empathic. So it really hasn't changed in any way like that. I've always believed that there was something beyond here, beyond this life when we die. And I am a paranormal investigator, so I do go out and try to interact with spirits. So it really didn't change in that way, but and I always said I wasn't afraid of death, but I'm really, truly not afraid of death. Like, I felt nothing on impact. And you would think that, being hit in a violent accident, we're both going over 55 miles an hour in the opposite direction. Like that I should have felt something, but I truly did not feel anything. I was just poof, gone. And so since then I've had a friend die in a car accident, and I knew that he didn't feel it, and that gave me a little bit of peace about the situation, And I know he's actually visited me in a dream since, gave me a message that I put on Facebook for our friends and said, okay, who claims this? Because the message wasn't for me, but the conversation, there was something to this conversation. Somebody needs to hear this. And I had 2 different people claim it and say, he would have told me that if I had been talking to him today. And I was like, okay. So I think things as far as intuition and after death communication has gotten a bit stronger since then.
Yeah.
And I'm going through experiences right now where it's like, okay, just opening up a bit more. But yeah, it wasn't like a dramatic change. It's been very subtle.
Yeah. Well, that's the subject of research. It's called a spontaneous mediumship experience.
So even when I was asleep, you would call it that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're getting a message from a deceased person, and it's for somebody else. So you're acting as a medium in a way, but it's spontaneous. You didn't ask to do it. You're not trying to do it, but bingo, you're put on the spot to do it.
Yeah. And when I woke up, I knew I had to put that message out there for someone. Like, I knew it wasn't for me. I couldn't keep that to myself, which meant going on Facebook and telling, 700 people, many of which were connected to him in some way.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all, I had a dream, and this is going to sound weird, but I feel like somebody needs to hear this. And it turned out that somebody did need to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
so that's wonderful. Your experience is there's always some spine tingling aspect of all NDEs, and yours has one too. It's like, just seeing you flying over the trees and saying, "Is that it? Is that all?"
Right.
Then, no, you're going back.
It was fun. And it was, a skeptic would be like, well, you just felt the seatbelt. And I'm like, no, two hands on my shoulders. That is not a seatbelt. Seatbelt only touches one spot. It was very tactile. That part was definitely felt something like.
So there's an out of body interaction there. Well, it's between two spiritual beings, but anyway.
But it felt very physical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful.
So
thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. I just felt like it was the right time, and now I have to decide if I want to leave the emotional part in the conversation.
No, actually,
in the podcast.
I think that it would be appropriate to at least put some of it in there.
Yeah, I guess part of the reason that I'm so interested in this and trying to get the message out there right now about this is people need to know this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay. I'll probably leave it in.
Good.
Maybe tone down the emotional part, like just pull the volume down a bit, but because when I edit this, I have to listen to myself again.
And then you'll start again.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh Lord. But so
had you shared that before?
I have told a few people close to me, like very close to me. I've not shared that publicly before. Yeah. I just came out of the NDE closet on this.
Well, that's good.
So were you in the hospital? Did you go to the hospital?
They took me in an ambulance to the hospital, and because I couldn't walk on my left, I couldn't put any weight on my left side, like my left foot. They x-rayed me from the hip down, and turned out I just had one bone that was broken in two places. They called it a broken ankle, but it was I can't remember which of the two bones in your lower leg, but it's the one that's not weight bearing, and the vibration actually broke it at the top of the bone too. So it was like 6 to 8 weeks in a boot, and trying to use crutches, which I'm not very coordinated. So it was more hopping around on one foot for a while. And I had a lot of PTSD issues for the first few months, just like I'd close my eyes and see the headlight again and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was amazing, because when my mom took me to get my stuff out of the car, took me to where they had towed the car, there was really no way I should have come out of that with just a broken leg. It was, and I had glass, like the window shattered on impact. I had glass embedded in my hands. I can still see the red spots on the scars on my hands where little shards of glass were embedded. And she had picked it out of my hair while I was waiting to get x-rayed. Like it was, it was a very scary thing to come out when there were these two guys who saw it happen, and they were just, the car stopped, and suddenly there was this hand going, "Ma'am, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. We're calling the ambulance." And I was like, why do I taste blood? Like, why is there, what's in my mouth? I'm like, did I just lose all my teeth? And it was dust from the airbag. It was like, because when the airbag expands and then explodes, it just blows all this dust on. So I was feeling like tasting grit, and My nose was bleeding from it, but like it really, I should have been so much more injured than I was after looking at the car. So it was just kind of a miracle on so many levels that
Right.
I came out of that. And they didn't x-ray my back. It turns out I sustained enough damage to cause scoliosis. But I didn't know that till years later when I was starting to really have issues, and eventually got my back x-rayed, and now I have to go to a chiropractor weekly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've got a constant reminder of this.
Yeah. Right.
But as far as spiritually, yeah, there was a lot of why am I still here? Like, why? How did I survive that? Why did I survive that? How are you going to make use of me at this point? And
Right.
I just have to kind
In
of
the
surrender.
midst of the craziness that was starting to set in big time.
Yeah.
So when did you start the podcast?
I actually didn't start it until last year. And I was inspired to start it because I was listening to other paranormal podcasts, and the hosts were talking about paranormal research and parapsychological research like it was something that was done in the past, like back when the Ryan Research Center was a part of Duke, which was decades ago,
Yeah,
and I was like, no, I'm friends with the executive director of the Ryan Research Center. Like, it's still there.
Right.
They're very active. And so I was like, okay, somebody needs to tell the world that people are actually researching these things and how they're researching these things.
Yeah,
so
that's good. That's good. Wow.
And going back to that, taking the spotlight off of me, because this is not supposed to be about me. You are actively still researching. Are you looking for people to share their stories?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we are slowly getting more prophetic vision surveys returned, and that's very helpful. We've noted a couple of additional things that we can now add to, and we need to bring it up to date. But the number of data points, let's say, the number of people who saw the same thing or essentially the same thing is growing, and there's a list of them, most of which we've covered in our talk in 2019. But we still want to do that. Yeah.
Okay. And if somebody listening has had an experience like that, how would they get in touch with you?
Okay, if there's a person who has had an NDE and had prophetic visions that are visions of the world's future, then there is a survey we'd like them to fill out, and let me get you the URL.
Okay. And I'll share the URL in the show notes for the episode, so it'll be easy for people to get there.
I'll say it. tinyurl.com/capital NDE hyphen capital F future hyphen capital V visions.
I'll make sure to put it in the show notes so that anybody who is listening, if you have had this experience or you know somebody who's had this experience who would like to fill out the survey, you can just click on the link in the survey and take it or share it with somebody else.
And just or send them that link, and take the survey. Okay. It's a Google survey, and it's fairly simple to do. And I think we say about half an hour to 45 minutes to fill it out.
Sounds good. Did you have anything else you wanted to chat about before we wrap up?
Oh yes, our website, selfconsciousmind.com. Yeah,
I'll put that link in the show notes too.
Yeah, anybody's interested in that has all of our stuff. So we do other stuff too, but we've covered the bases, most of the bases.
Cool. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday to talk with me about NDEs. This has been a really enlightening conversation. Like, I came into it knowing some things about it, but there were things that you shared that I had never heard of. So just really fascinating, really wonderful. And I so appreciate your time.
Yes, we're very happy to do this. And thank you.
It's been a privilege. And thank you for sharing.
Yes, for your
opening
sharing.
up and sharing. Really.
I wouldn't have done it if it hadn't have been the two of you. So
okay.
Thank you. I hope y'all have a wonderful weekend.
Yes, you too.
Thanks. You. Thanks again to Robert and Suzanne for taking time to talk with me today, and thank you for listening. If you have an idea for a show topic, you can fill out the contact form at peeppodcast.com. That's PEEP podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. If I can find a study about it, I'll be happy to use it. Special thanks to the listeners who have submitted topic ideas. Also, if you're interested in sharing your own personal stories of paranormal experiences, I'd love to have you on the show. It can be as anonymous as you'd like. You can keep up with the show on its Facebook page, facebook.com/peeppodcast. We also have a group linked from that page in case you're interested in joining the conversation over there. If you like the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app. Share it with friends and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Doing so will help the podcast be found by others. Special thanks to everyone who has given the show some love. I really do appreciate it. The Peep Podcast is 100% free to enjoy, but it's not free for me to create. So, like many other independent podcasters, I'll happily accept assistance. If you're interested in supporting the show financially, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Nicolle Maroc. The Patreon account still exists, but Buy Me a Coffee doesn't require a monthly commitment. All donations will be received with extreme gratitude. No matter how you support the show, listening, telling others about it, financial assistance, or any other way, I truly appreciate you being here. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe and be well.
Wow.